Good afternoon. Good evening, Elaine. Can you hear me okay?
I'll call the meeting to order.
The meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Alexander.
Here.
Trustee Holm. Trustee Nugent. Trustee Renucci.
Here.
Trustee Smalley.
Here.
Trustee Wisniewski.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we will start with citizen participation per Village Resolution 2017-01. Anyone wishing to address the village board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject can be anything, whether on the agenda or not. The village board should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of the publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of this citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or if specifically allowed by a majority vote of the village board due to involvement in an agenda item. That said, going once, going twice. Okay, we will close citizen participation. Move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Any discussion?
I have one question. On item 3, could somebody elaborate a little bit on item 3? I was kind of left off a little bit.
Can you elaborate to your question about elaboration?
Yeah, it just said consider approval of structure agreement. I couldn't remember what that exactly was about.
So 40, I believe they want to put a fence in the drainage easement.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to miscellaneous business. Airport fuel, consider contract with Titan Aviation Fuels and consider airport fuel purchase. Jason?
Okay, so not to steal Doug's thunder, but we are back open for fuel at the airport. He'll be talking about it later, but we are selling fuel once again at the airport. We're going to have to purchase fuel, obviously, and going forward, we'll need to purchase fuel. In doing our research, there's a couple different ways we can go about this. We can purchase fuel as an independent, in other words, shop around for fuel to various vendors. or we can become what's known as branded, which is the recommendation I'm providing tonight is to move forward with branding our fuel farm. And we do have with us tonight Bill Kovac from Titan Fuels. And Bill's just going to kind of give you guys a quick 5-minute overview of what Titan is and what they do. And then he can address any questions that come up from there. So Bill, if you want to come up to the podium, please.
There we go. Okay, I'm Bill Kovac, and I work for Titan Aviation Fuels. And one of the things in the aviation industry that is recognized by the majority of the operators of aircraft, owners of aircraft, from small training aircraft through small jets that could utilize East Troy Airport, is they recognize branding, or like for instance, Titan Aviation Fuels, is there's a specific criteria that an airport has to meet and maintain to be able to carry the Titan sign. And part of that is quality control, which is huge in this industry, to be able to mitigate any issues with fuel, training of the people that maintain the fuel farm, where the fuel comes from, the ability to mitigate any type of issues with the fuel farm that arises, or with the fuel that's in the fuel farm that is sold to the open public. Eastern Aviation Fuels is doing business as Titan since 1975. We are a national and international company. Majority of our branded and our customers are in the United States. We also are down in the Caribbean, and we also do some reselling of fuel over in Europe and Switzerland as well. We have about 600 branded FBOs in the United States, and we do business with about another 1,400 unbranded, and most of those that we call unbranded are corporates. You know, we have corporates like Menards. They have their own fuel farm for their corporation up there in Eau Claire. John Deere Corporation down in the Quad Cities is one of our flight departments that we sell fuel to directly. Whirlpool, the list goes on. And again, there's a perceived level of assurance as far as the type of the quality of the fuel that you get, that it's safe, it's clean, it's dry. One of the things that we bring to the table is the fact that we have about 12 quality control technicians that travel the United States. One of them actually is based up in Waupun, up off of Highway 10 between Appleton and Stevens Point. That's actually in this direct area. I'm actually based in Muskego, Wisconsin, which is just up the road as far as being able to come down and help with any type of issues or any recommendations that help the airport save money or to be able to continue selling fuel safely and efficiently. That I'm that close. So we do business with over 37 different refineries in the United States. Phillips, Marathon, Husky are some of the few that are right out of the Chicago market. The majority of the fuel that comes up the Magellan pipeline is up at the Des Plaines is Phillips product, which is what they have gas, and also we have Shell and Phillips both for jet fuel and avgas. We also have multiple dealers in this area. One of them, which is we've talked with Jason and with Doug as far as getting what they call a split load. And again, a way to be able to save money to the village, where typically a load of avgas is 8,500 gallons in a transport, 8,000 gallons in jet, typically in a smaller airport like this. And you also want to be able to turn over the fuel at a minimum of no more than 6 months between loads of fuel. So a lot of times it makes sense, at least until we find out how many gallons you're going to be consuming, or I should say selling, that you probably would not want to have to get a full load of 8,000 gallons, plus it also reduces the amount of money that needs to be outlaid for the cost of that fuel. So in this case, we were talking about a load of avgas that needs to be coming fairly shortly, and over at Palwaukee, which is Hawthorne Global, is a partner that works very well with us on helping out some of the other small airports in the area, and they've agreed to do split loads on avgas. So this first load, if it all gets approved, half the load would go to Palwaukee Airport down there in the Chicago market, and the other half would go here. The difference, for instance, in the savings of the fuel is that it's only an additional 2 cents by splitting that for the freight, because it's very convenient the way it comes up from down by Argo, which is down by the canal that comes up from Mississippi into Lake Michigan. It goes right by Midway Airport down there. There's a real large, if you look on a satellite view, you'll see a bunch of tanks down there, and that's where avgas is transported and dropped off. So in that case, instead of having to pay an additional 12 cents a gallon where you would get what they call dedicated load, where only 4,000 gallons is coming up from the depot down there, you'd be having the whole load coming up and half of it going to the Chicago market there at Pewaukee Airport and the other half coming here, and you'd save effectively about 12 cents on freight per gallon. We do that with the jet fuel as well, and we have several. We also have Monroe is another one that we could do some split loads with. Another real big thing that's real important, getting back on the training on quality control. We do an audit every year on your fuel farm at no charge. That goes over all the records as far as all the maintenance of the fuel farm, changing of the fuel filters, training Doug as far as the proper operation of the testing of the fuel farm to make sure it's operating efficiently, making sure that all the daily, quarterly, weekly, monthly checks are done, all the paperwork that comes in from the transport, the BOL, all those documents go in a 3-ring binder, how exactly it's laid out, and gives a very clear, accurate, if anybody has to review those documents, where that comes into fact, that if there's ever an incident or an accident, not has anything to do with a problem with the fuel, but if there's an accident and that customer took fuel, a lot of times the NTSB, the state of Wisconsin, and DOT want to look at the records just to make sure as they're doing the investigation on what happened with the incident or the accident of the aircraft. It's imperative that the village keep very accurate records, even though the fuel may have nothing to do with the incident of the whatever happened to the aircraft. It had to do with fuel or not. So it's real important, to make sure that that's all came in proper order. We do the training for that all that training is offered at no cost to the village. We also have a bi-yearly 3-day class that we have up in Milwaukee. That's at no charge. That's in the fall of 2024. We have another one that's in Bowling Green, Kentucky. That's in the fall of 2023. I would recommend that Doug go to that one. I think even though we have an extensive online training that, again, is at no cost, that, for the first time around, to understand all the parameters that go into, maintaining the fuel, all the records. They have a hands-on down there as far as how to do some of the checks for the jet fuel, which is a little bit more in depth than the avgas is. So that's another aspect of being branded and also added to the things that we do at no charge and is a value to the village. Another thing is that we're one of the largest. I know I'm going over 5 minutes here, but I think some of this is really important. Another big thing is we have one of the largest distribution for filters, which have to be changed every year. Also, any valves or any type of gaskets or anything that you have, we're one of the largest distributors of that, and we offer these parts to our dealers at a substantial reduction off the regular price. Again, our purpose is to be able to make the airport successful in selling fuel at the least amount of cost, and that includes buying the parts that you need to maintain the fuel farm, be able to get a good price on, and also to leverage other airports in the area to reduce the cost for your freight to get the fuel here so you're at a competitive rate. Another thing that we do is we offer marketing. We have over 30,000 customers that have Titan contract fuel cards and Titan credit cards that we do big email blasts as far as announcing this airport is here and it's selling fuel and it's open for business, and that that you're going to assure that you come into the East Troy Municipal Airport and that you're going to be confronted with well, not confronted, enjoy the ability to have, the fuel that meets all our stringent requirements. Another big asset that we bring to the table is the knowledge of all our people that we will make available to Jason and to Doug as far as any issues that you need to make sure that you're taking care of as far as meters or for instance, talking about making sure that you're registered with the state for the fuels that you sell that needs to be registered on a regular basis as far as the avgas and the jet fuel. There's a lot of little things that our quality control team and our support team, bring to light and make sure that you understand it and that you're in compliance with that, so there's not any surprises down the road. So that just kind of just hits the very high points, but and there is no cost for that.
Excellent, thank you. What questions? Go ahead.
I have a question. I'm just curious, I know you talked about split loads, but you're splitting them up basically between a couple of different airports, okay? My question is, though, if does any of your fuel come out of Superior, or no? That's
No.
too far north, okay. My other question is, though, is that would the village, if it was needed, could the village get a split load of avgas and Jet A on the same truck, or no?
Absolutely not, because the concern about cross-contamination.
Okay, that was my question, and that's why.
But that's a good question, and we do hear that a lot, so.
Any conversation about the Swift fuel that we have?
Yeah, so that's one thing I did want to bring up. I am going to recommend that we do not, going forward, we do not sell an alternative fuel. So part of the reason the Swift fuel was developed is the 100 low lead, which is our main, so currently we have 100 low lead, Jet A, and then the Swift fuel. Part of the reason the Swift fuel was developed is for price, and the second other large reason was it contains no lead, right? So we're all used to unleaded fuels, and that's kind of, at some point, we're going to be talking about the 100 low lead going away. Even though it's low lead, it still contains lead. So at some point, that's going to go away. But unfortunately, we don't sell a lot of the Swift fuel. I think last year we sold about 3,000 gallons. And the concern is there is you start getting towards a 6-month shelf life. You can't buy enough to be price effective, but yet have, keep it on hand too long. So I'm going to be recommending that we do not move forward with the Swift fuels.
And you told me that we're only one of 4, right?
Yeah, so the BOA does an annual survey of airports, and they ask things about, landings, takeoffs, things like that. They ask what fuels you're selling, and in the state of Wisconsin, out of 100 airports, now there's more airports in Wisconsin, but 100 of them reported in on the survey, and only 4 of them actually sell that Swift fuel.
Yeah, the company that produces it, their projections never came to fruition with regard to how much they were really going to sell, because, it's just, there aren't as many of these low compression piston aircraft out there as they thought there was going to be. There was going to be this big explosion, and people were going to be driven to this fuel, and it's really not necessary. Unless you would like to comment on that.
I think my concern was more of our last discussion and the amount of Swift that we have and the amount of time it's been in ground. And
Yep, and then we'll talk about that later on. So what Titan has before us today is a 5-year agreement. And essentially what that agreement is, and feel free to chime in here, Bill, is that we exclusively buy fuel from Titan. And so we have to, pilot pulls up to the fuel farm and they purchase fuel with a credit card, right? So there's a percentage fees, and they're kind of laid out, the schedule is laid out in that agreement. I think MasterCard and Visa, I think, are 2.25%, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
On every charge. Titan takes that to 2.25%.
Well, actually, that goes to US Bank. It's a pass-through. So
Okay.
it's not something that Titan is enjoying as far as that margin, what have you. That, I would say probably almost about 2% of that goes back to US Bank.
Okay. And so then the rest is our fuel sales, our profits on fuel sales. One other thing I want to note, so I actually did quite a bit of research on Titan and made a lot of phone calls to a lot of area airports, and when I say area, in the state. And a lot of them, everybody had good things to say about Titan. And my other concern about this was price, right? So obviously we want a safe product to sell, but we want to be competitive. As we know, our neighbors are very competitive with fuel, and we want to be competitive. So, but all of those FBOs and airport managers that I spoke with all projected to me that they received a savings by going through Titan rather than through their independents. Which I think is going to be important for us to be able to get the best pricing we can, the best product we can, and yet be competitive. So that was just a concern for me, is are we, and the other thing Bill did is, so we have some invoices on the last time fuel was purchased for our airport. And so I asked Bill for the comparative pricing from Titan for that same time frame, and I think it was 10 to 15 cents a gallon less through Titan at that time. So there's definitely potential for cost savings here.
Bill, can you talk a little bit more about the marketing piece of it? Because that's always been a challenge for us, about getting us better known and then helping us compete on that price as well.
Right.
And that people can count on the fuel that we're selling.
One of the things that I put in under our branding, as far as some of the things that we do, which was, I gave it to Jason, was give an allowance to be able to advertise at a gold level at our cost, that we would pick that, that's part of the package of being with us for 5 years, be able to, amortize some of those costs that we provide to you. AirNav, it seems like the gold standard, or the one of the biggest go-tos for us, a lot of the pilots. And one of the things that level does is it lets you explain, and we'll use Rhonda Bernthal, who's our marketing manager, to help craft, the wording and stage some nice photos, of maybe of the fuel farm or someone fueling, or a nice shot of inside, where we have of the pilot lounge area, what have you. And, so they kind of get a feeling with the pilots. So one of the things that they do look for, they look for a branded location, because that gives them a level of assurance as far as the quality. They're not going to come somewhere where the fuel hoses are crumbling or fuel's been in the ground for 2 years. I mean, that's pretty much a fact of perception that the pilots have. So that's number one. Number two, AirNav will have ability where that goes out to everybody, and that's where a lot of people look, hey, I'm going to be going into the Milwaukee area, what airports are around. Also, AirNav seems to be one that a lot of the other pricing agencies will pick off the price off of. So you'll want to make sure that Doug, and I'm sure Doug will do this because he seems very concerned about making sure that we have competitive and be able to have a very successful airport here, is that they'll use that price that's on the AirNav page to populate, FlightAware or some of these other aviation as far as the price of the fuel. Okay, so that's one thing we do. And then we also have a very large pilot base that we have for not only contract fuel, which really doesn't apply here because that's usually more of larger airports and it's usually where it's full service. However, there are pilots that get contract fuel that also own their own small airplane, a lot actually. So they're going to be seeing that visibility. We send out email blasts. Where we have Facebook exposure. We have all the different electronic, which East Troy would be advertised at no cost. And then also we can come up with, we've done things where we kind of help with, where a small airport will have like a fly-in breakfast or something. A lot of times what we'll do there is we'll put together, a list of pilots that we have in a geographical area of, say, 150 miles or something like that, and send a blast out, hey, on this Saturday, come on in, we got a pancake breakfast. A lot of times we'll also try to maybe do some kind of sponsorship on, maybe help pay for the tables that we have out there, or some of the other things to be able to generate interest, especially if we're trying to rebrand and introduce, the airport as far as, fuel that's here and it's available, that you have the ability to, and I'm not even sure before if you had multi-service before. I didn't look if that was available before or not, but we have the full range of credit cards that go through U.S. Bank. U.S. Bank owns multi-service, and that's a real big credit card that's used for a lot of aviation, because what it does is when they send the invoice every month, that has the N number of the airplane on it and how many gallons. And that's the only credit card that does that. So if someone has multiple airplanes, it would say November 15 Echo Fox, how many gallons, what day. If you drop down to American Express, they'll give you how many gallons, but not what airplane. And then if you drop into MasterCard or Visa, it has East Troy Municipal Airport and, $320. So a lot of times if someone's got a multi-service, they like to use it. That's one of the things that U.S. Bank does probably the majority of the aviation transactions in the United States. Some of the other smaller banks will actually they'll piggyback onto U.S. Bank, which costs more to do that. They'll usually charge another 0.5% or 1% for multi-service because multi-service only can be transacted through U.S. Bank. So that's one of the reasons we use U.S. Bank, because that's kind of the bank that everybody uses for aviation products. We also trying to think of any other, and if we want to do any custom, if you have a list of customers that you want to send out. Right now, Clintonville is a very small airport north of Green Bay up there. They're one of our airports. They're self-serve. We're working with the city administrator up there. They're going to have an open house one morning, and we're doing a big direct mailing for them, and also she's pulling up Kaz Muskie is her name, who's the city treasurer up there, and helping her and then also maybe accessing the EAA or coming up with different groups that maybe we could piggyback on to be able to make that day more successful.
Yeah, that's great, because we used to have some of that, and it's kind of been all volunteer effort, and that's been, kind of fallen by the wayside. So that's good examples to hear. If we did proceed forward with something here in the next, with an approval tonight, and, we've got AirVenture coming up at the end of July, would we be able to be in place with some initial, not to the level that you just described, but some initial marketing?
Absolutely. In fact, actually, a couple of small airports were just calling me today and yesterday, and working with Ronna Bernthal, our marketing manager or director, and we're looking at coming up with some direct mail where we have a lot of the airports that are having some kind of special, to fly, because a lot of them like to land somewhere. It gets very. We also supply fuel up at Oshkosh for Basler, but a lot of people don't like to. It's very intimidating up there to get first of all, to fly into there, and number two, they get in there. It's kind of cumbersome to get fuel, so a lot of them will try to stop somewhere within like 50 miles, top off, fly in there. Then they don't have to mess with it. Not necessarily worrying about pricing, but it's just a lot. It's kind of like information or a lot of things going on way too fast, and it kind of simplifies it where they get the fuel before they get there. They go in there, or maybe they're going to Fond du Lac, and then they come back, and then they'll stop somewhere on the way back too. So we advertise saying, maybe they're, if you want to come in, we're going to offer 25% off during that day, or that couple days leading up to it, maybe a couple days after, whatever. And we try to blast the area within, like 250 miles of going into Oshkosh. But yes, we would still have time to be able to include East Troy in that.
Jason, did it come down to a choice between independent suppliers and Titan, or is there a third possibility?
There are other,
It's on. Maybe it's just not, maybe I just need to get closer to Mary. It's okay.
I'm not complaining.
All right. The second question, the insurance requirements and the costs associated with having Titan as a other insured or also insured. Do we know about what that might run?
So I know Eileen had reached out last week to insurance and updated our policy to what that extent is. I don't know the answer to that. Chris asked me a similar question about insurance today, so we're going to have to just double up on that and make sure that we are covered appropriately and to the level that Titan is asking for. So
for the 50 million?
which I believe I think pretty much everything we have is to 100 million. Or no, I'm sorry, that's the million. You're talking about the additional 50, right? Is that what you're referring to? That they're providing to us.
As long as we meet certain criteria,
Correct.
right?
And that's
you're
what I
checking
need to
on?
confirm.
Yeah, okay.
And that, if I may,
Yeah.
that requires like a base minimum of 500,000. We prefer $1 million, which personally, that's way too low in my opinion, even as your base insurance. But that's our minimum to be able to have the additional $50 million rider. And then also to make sure that you do all the training for the quality control, because what they're basing the risk on is that if you follow the training and keep the fuel farm to the specifications, which is only ASTM and the 103, which is regular common sense level of maintaining the fuel farm, if you do those things, that qualifies you for the $50 million, which is offered as part of being branded at no cost.
Are you, are you okay with the 15-day payment terms?
I talked with Eileen about that before she left, and yes. So initially, what they had asked for is that we wire them the money within 15 days, and Eileen's answer to me is, yeah, we're not quite ready to do that yet. We could potentially be by the end of the year. So I went back to Bill and said, we'll have to send you a check, and they changed that part of the agreement, so.
Are we paying Bill directly, or do we pay US Bank?
So that's for the fuel purchases. We're paying Titan. And then when the purchases are made, then they go into the bank, then they wire that to us
Okay.
within 48 hours, right?
Yes, that's correct. Usually, most of the time, it's 24. The way it works is all the charges that go through the QT pod, that goes directly into U.S. Bank, and then that's directly then deposited electronically right to your account.
And Chris, do you have any issues?
I had a chance to look it over this afternoon, and actually, the presentation tonight was helpful. I had some questions, and you actually kind of clarified some of those. There's a couple of other minor language changes maybe I can talk to you about tomorrow, just to kind of make sure I understand what we're looking at. But
Okay.
I guess on a substantive level, since this is a new arrangement for the village, it's coming from a different structure, I always prefer to have our clients have as much flexibility as possible. So I'll ask, the board hasn't even asked, but I'll ask, would you guys be open to a shorter term or no? I mean, the way it's structured currently, it's a 5-year base and then automatically renewing for 1-year terms after that. So in practice, as I read it, the village couldn't get out of this for 5 years if it's not going well. Not that I expect it not to, but if they find that it's not working the way they wanted it to work out, would you guys be open to a shorter window?
We would, but we might need to reduce some of the incentives that we have. One of the things that we also like to do is have the product recognition, which is kind of the big one, especially for smaller airports, as far as us to be able to at least break even on it, as far as one of the things we're going to do. And I think it's important. First of all, we're going to replace the panel on that one sign that's on your building, but that's fairly small cost. We find it very effective where we will put a pole sign, a 4x4 lit on both sides that would be at the fuel farm. And that cost alone for that costs us about $12,000. And about the amount of quantity of fuel that goes through and the very small margin that we have on each gallon, it gets pretty hard to be able to even just recoup the cost of just the setup and the upkeep of the setup of everything that we do. And I did provide some customers, because a lot of people are saying, geez, we're getting into this relationship and we're in it for 5 years. Some of them are 7 and some of them are 10, depending on some of the things that we're doing, or if we're doing some other additional costs to be able to help recoup, at least break even on some of the expenditures that we do. This one is fairly small. It's basically just the pole sign. It's fairly expensive. Then also we're doing about, I think it's like $2,000 for the air nav, and setting some of the other and getting some of the marketing in motion that you're barely getting going at the 3-year mark. And then so I had a couple that have been with us a long time. Rob Driver down there at Monroe, which is kind of similar. It's full self-serve with assist. Self-serve occasionally that Rob provides. He's been with us, I think it's approaching 8 or 9 years now. Then a couple of the other, I don't know if Jason was able to reach out and be able to get some level of comfort as far as, not worrying about, geez, are we getting into a situation that's going to be uncomfortable, which we certainly don't want you to be in.
I thought too, I mean, 5 years right off the bat just seemed kind of long in case something didn't, jive. It's just, and it's nothing against you, your company, or anything else. It's just, I'm a little wary about committing to that long of a term without really having any experience. But in that same vein, if things work out, then I would see no problem at the end of that 3-year period, to say, okay, we're going to re-up then for 5. Things go out great and work out well, no problem. Now, your concern is, or at least the way I'm hearing it, is the investment in the signage and that kind of stuff out at the airport. So if, and again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, and if everybody thinks I'm wrong, you can just all raise your hands at one time. But it's not like I haven't been there before. But I'm asking that maybe what the village would do would invest in those signage, get a 3-year contract, and then if it works out well and we sign for another 5, then they reimburse us.
Yeah, what I was going to suggest, Bill, is, and I think Jason probably gave you the background as to why there's that hesitancy, and again, nothing to do with you or the presentation or anything like that. It's just the history that we have. Is I get your situation from a business standpoint. You're making an investment, as you said, low margin, so you got to amortize it over a number of years. What if, working with Jason and Chris, we were able to craft some language that at the 3-year mark, should we choose to terminate, there's an early termination fee that would then true you up to what that investment is. Otherwise, we can continue to the 5-year mark, and then we can continue after that if we're still happy.
Yeah, we could do, because I don't want you uncomfortable or kind of swallowing hard. I mean, that's not the way we want to have the relationship. That's not how Titan operates or how I operate. So what we probably could do is I could probably do something where at the 3-year mark that, that if you have some type of objection that and you want to exit it, that we can amortize whatever is, left on, for instance, the sign or the investment, and that way I find that very unlikely it will happen, but I'm sure you've heard that before. So, but where you get some level of comfort with that, you're not feel like you're on rails for 5 years.
No, and the previous agreement we had, which I can't remember when it was signed, but for some reason the decision was to have it go to 2030. And I'm sitting here; it's the middle of 2023, and 2030 sounds like forever from now. So,
Sure.
And we're talking 5 years. That's 2028. So, I think if and I would leave it, in my opinion, to staff to negotiate that with you.
Sure.
I think that would allay a lot of my concerns, and to Chris's point, give us the option while keeping you whole. And then if everybody is good, well, then we just say, well, we put that in there and didn't have to use it.
If that makes you comfortable, we can certainly work through that.
So I just want to remind the board that we do not have a meeting in July until late in July, so we're over a month out. So I would suggest whatever motion is made, that we're authorizing staff to move forward, and then when they've got something that they're comfortable with based upon the discussion here, that then I'm authorized to sign. If that's what you all care to do.
Then I'd make a motion to authorize staff to continue negotiations with Titan Aviation Fuel to encompass some of the suggestions we came up with tonight, and that at the conclusion of those agreements, it would be fine for Matt to go ahead and sign that agreement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? Gordy?
I just,
Go ahead.
Joe? Go ahead, Joe.
so in the agreement, if we could look at an out clause, so if they don't fulfill certain obligations, that we have the ability to get out of not saying that you would, fail in this endeavor, but just want to make sure we're covering ourselves.
And we'll confirm the insurance as well.
I guess my other question is, does Mr. Geary have any other questions?
There were a couple of language changes or questions I had. There's a reference to purchasing of invoices from credit and charge card sales, maybe purchased by seller from buyer for approved charge and credit cards, things like that. I don't understand the logistics of what's going on there, so it might just be a confusion on my end. I'm sure you can clarify it. Otherwise, if not, we can clean up that language a little bit. So things like that. But substantively, I think we've got the direction from where the board wants to go.
And some of that's in there for instance, if there was a default on like a fuel bill, and that's a way for Titan to be able to get hold, where we could get those funds that were like, say you were defaulted 2 months on, a $25,000 fuel bill, for a transport load, and that would be a way for Titan to be able to get those funds directly from, that are coming from the QT pod to be able to satisfy that bill, is my understanding. I'm not an attorney myself, but.
Yeah, and I see that language in there, but like I said, this is in the charge credit card program section. And again, it may just be the fact that I'm not familiar with how your operation goes. And
Sure.
once I understand it, it'll make sense.
Okay, we'll definitely get you comfortable with that.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Any questions for us, Bill?
No, I think we've,
Okay, good. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you so much.
thank you.
you for your time
Yeah,
and your patience.
I'm looking forward to.
We're looking forward to
having
it
a
as well.
successful operation there at the airport, so.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill. So also, fuel farm related, we did not have any money budgeted in the 2023 operations budget for purchasing of fuel. So I am ready to give Bill the green light for an order. I need the board to authorize me $20,000 to get a split load of 100 low lead. We have about 400 gallons left. And we're looking to purchase 4,500 gallons, like I say, a split load of 100 low lead.
And I did speak with Eileen. There is there's a fund balance for the airport available that would be more than sufficient to cover this. So
There's about 100,000 in that account.
Do we have enough Jet A out there?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we proceed with an order of 4,500 gallons of 100 low lead from Titan Aviation for approximately $20,000.
I'll second.
all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Jason, second. He beat me to it. Okay. All right. Anything else that I missed on Titan? Okay. All right, we'll move on. Impoundment update.
Okay, so if you guys remember, a couple of months ago, we had come to you looking to install some monitoring wells adjacent to North Shore Drive and Church Street to try to pin down what's going on in our storm sewer discharges. We're seeing an elevated pH on the discharge there of the water, and it's beginning to break down the concrete, and we're trying to chase that back. And tonight we have Krista and Kirk from Endpoint Solutions here to kind of give us a report on what the findings and to summarize what we found.
This? Awesome. Just so I put the map in front of me. Okay, hi. I'm Krista with Endpoint, and as Jason stated, we were installing 4 wells from what we believed would have been a preferential pathway, how the contamination, elevated pHs, could have gotten to the outfalls. And we sampled groundwater each of the 4 monitoring well locations for VOCs, pHs, total hardness, and metals. And all those results from the monitoring wells came back relatively low. We didn't see any major exceedances from the lab report in any of those contaminants. However, we did resample the 2 outfall locations, and we did confirm that there was indeed elevated pHs in both of those. Now, this can be seen as a good thing, as either way, we would have to confirm that, especially under that residential area where those monitoring wells were located, that groundwater was not contaminated that could have an effect on any of the residences in that area, and that indeed we did do. So the groundwater there has not been affected, but on the other side, we have ruled out one possible source of that contamination, and now that brings us to evaluating some other sources for this elevated pH.
And so what we were thinking is there's some monitoring wells on the former Trent Tube site that were producing some higher pH number. So the thought was it was going along a storm sewer and a sanitary sewer and using it as a conduit underground to get to our storm sewers extensions. And unfortunately, this did not prove that. So I'm not convinced yet, however, that that's not where it's coming from. It's coming from somewhere, in my opinion, over on that site, just because that high pH is rather odd, and we know it's over there. The question is, how is it getting into the former impoundment? So I know you guys had provided another proposal on your thoughts on what that next step might be. Maybe you could just kind of walk us through what that looks like and what you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next step is trying to identify the source of this contamination, as I previously stated. And the next choice for us is to install what are called sandpoint wells. They're hand-driven, and they would be in right along where you guys added the new section of the outfall. So right alongside the riverbank, preferably right where you guys monitored and saw the water leaching in to that new addition. And we would drive the points down and take a soil sample and then sample the water directly from where we think it's infiltrating. So we can see whether or not it is from sediment that has already been deposited there, or whether it is actually from another source further out that's coming in through the groundwater from another location.
I have a question. Jason, actually, this might be for you, but I'm sure I'm kind of swinging for the seats here, but my question is I mean, you and I talked about this a little bit, and I thought, geez, it would be awfully tough for that stuff to flow all the way from the east side, by where the old Trent 2 plant is, all the way under Church Street and all the way back over there where the storm drains are. But my question is, that fill that was all moved around out there, we have no idea where the fill that was used to cover up all of those drains, when we redid that and put the pipes in and all that. We don't know actually where that fill came from, do we?
Well, we know it came from our site.
Well, I understand that,
Specifically
but
where
we don't know where
we
on
don't.
the site.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I guess the other question is, and I think I asked you this in the past, you're sure that nothing is coming down from Beulah Avenue?
So the challenge there is, I would agree with that theory if it was only in that one storm sewer discharge, but it's not. It's in multiple storm sewer discharges.
And how many storm sewer discharges?
Currently 2. I've seen it in 3.
Okay, and where do the 3 come from, or where do they originate at?
One's off of North Shore, one is off of Beulah Avenue, and the third one is off of South Street.
This is going to maybe be a dumb question, but with the lack of rainfall lately, have we seen any changes in the pH?
From our samples, it did seem pretty much on par with what you guys, 6 samples you guys have collected previously.
Yeah, actually, I think, didn't you see like a 10? Because
10,
previously we had it
8.
seen as high as a 12.
With the lowest being like, 10.3 or 20, yeah, ours is around 10.8 in
Right.
both.
So it's not like, I guess where I was trying to go is in a wetter period of time, you might get more runoff and it might, be carrying it from somewhere, but we're still getting a high pH, even with no rain.
So I know we're still getting the discharge, which tells me that this water is still attacking the concrete because I'm seeing the cloudy water. So if that answers your question. Also, just so the board is aware, that Tim hasn't seen any of this yet. He's on vacation, so I want to get him up to speed on what has been sent back to us here, but just so you're aware. For me, it's I get sinking more wells to try to, but I guess I'm just not clear on yet what that's going to tell us. So we know that this water is getting into the pipe, what we're assuming. We know it's getting, because we saw it on video, right? We saw groundwater is infiltrating through a joint. We're assuming it's attacking that concrete, the elevated pH. So we know that that water is probably outside of the pipe. And I guess I don't understand how sampling right near that pipe tells us anything different than what we probably are already assuming / know.
What's getting in farther to the north?
And I also understand that this is, none of us know what's going on underground. I mean, we can have theories. Obviously, we had a theory, which I thought was a really good theory. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out. But I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'd love to sit here and just say, let's go do this, but I'm not sure what this is going to come back with,
Yeah.
And I guess change my mind of that.
Well, I guess it all comes down to, as you said, where is this coming from? And initially, if it was further up from where the storm sewers were draining into, we sampled along those lines and we didn't see anything. So if we trail it down, the next assumption for us is that it's getting in closer to where the outfalls are located. And then, I mean, the sediment there, something could have been placed, a fill material, even something, Trent Tubing's been open since the 40s, maybe it is something that they had back in the 40s that has then been deposited there. So now our assumption is if it is, contamination is getting into that outfall from somewhere closer to the outfall, is it sediment? Is probably the contaminant, and at that point, then it's the 3 that we're proposing to install. We're going to be able to collect from that filler material where the water is going to be going through and infiltrating.
So let's just assume for a second that we do these 3 sand wells, and then they all come back with what we're expecting to see. What do you think next steps would be from there? I mean, we know we're going to have to line these pipes probably to get this situation, and I don't want to use the word stop because that really just plugs the hole at that point. There's still something going on there, but if we find that at all 3 of these wells, then what would the next logical step from there be? Go further, or?
Yeah, that third point I think is actually going to assist in some way by seeing the degree and how far up this contamination is actually spreading. And from there, if it is show up in the sediment, it's lining the pipes, figuring out how we remediate or contain this potential hazard. And I mean, from that way, that's a whole other discussion, really.
So if these 3 monitoring wells show the results we're expecting or we're seeing in the discharge, do we then just go out further and then keep going until that stops? Or I guess that's what I'm not clear on.
I agree with you, Jason, because, I mean, to me, we know it's coming in to the impound. That water is flowing in, all right? We know it's coming in. I'd like to know where it's coming from, not where it's ending up.
Sure.
We know where it's ending up, at the end of the pipe, where it comes out.
Yeah.
And to me, and no offense, it just doesn't make sense to sink a well there to say, yeah, I guess there is stuff coming out of there. I mean, we need to know where it's coming from.
And I guess that's easier said than done. I mean, that's the challenge here.
Well, Jason, didn't you say that you televised the pipe and saw where water was infiltrating?
Yeah, it's
I'm sorry, I may be missing something here. I'm sorry.
it found the nearest joint it could, and it's getting in, and it's using the pipe as the conduit to get out to the waterway.
Do we have to do this within a certain time because it's seasonal or anything like that?
So those storm sewer extensions have been in for some time now, and I, other than on a heavy rain, I don't think that there's a time I haven't seen the discharge. So I think it's pretty consistent.
Well, I'm just wondering
Annually.
Can we table this until Tim is able to review this?
Yeah,
Take a look at it and make his recommendations
I
as
would-
the village engineer.
I would definitely want to do that tonight, no matter what you guys decide. I wouldn't want to proceed with anything till we get his thoughts on something. But I'm just.
So, Krista, looking at the back to the theory that it was coming from Trent Tube, or as you said, Trent Tube back in the 40s could have put something up, in the old impoundment there, and then that's what we were moving around. Do you see anything from the results other than a high pH that seems correlated to what we see over in the remediation at the former Trent Tube site?
At this point, elevated pH was the only contamination we saw. So,
Yeah, because there's a lot of heavy metals and other things over there, and I just want to make sure from a contamination, what are we seeing as chemically driving that high pH level?
I mean, that's kind of, we're not sure yet. I mean, we're trying to figure that out of what could possibly be causing that. Looking in the area and the possibilities of how the source and how it could have gotten there, it's, even historically, it seems pretty slim of the amount of sources we had here. The soil and the sediment is our best guess at this point. I mean,
And I think the other thing, too, we have to remember is, whatever was in that impoundment, there's the downstream. It could have come anywhere from upstream, too, if it was in there, not just that somebody dumped it in that impoundment years ago.
Yeah, no, understood. It just, what I go back to is we saw we know there's high pH on that site, and that's exactly the theory here, and like I say, I thought it was a pretty sound one, but, and in some ways, this, like Krista mentioned, is a good thing that we didn't find, what we thought we might find along North Shore Drive, so let's not forget that.
So I think what we need is, we need you to meet with our village engineer, Tim Lynch, and Jason, kind of go through the findings here, take a look, talk to Tim. Does he recommend, what you're recommending as the approach? But I think, too, when we come back to the question, I'm sorry, somebody asked, or maybe you asked, of, okay, the so what? Like, what are the next steps? And I think, looking at, I'm trying to go find your map here, but, it's kind of like, I look at it as you drew a border and you found nothing, and so you're shrinking the border is what I was hearing you say, to like be closer in on the target. And the question is how are we shooting for these different areas to find potentially where it's coming from, and there's obviously cost associated with that. So I'd like to get Tim's input on that. And then also go ahead and talk to Tim about what do we have to do from a lining standpoint so that we get that done here, because otherwise, I don't know the ability to do that in the middle of winter, or if we don't move fast enough, are we looking at doing it next year? So does that seem, I mean, this is, as you said, you can look at it positively. Yes, the answer is their groundwater's good, and at the same time, we're still left with the mystery. So let's just, and come back, maybe you've got 3 or 4 weeks till our next meeting, and we can put that together.
okay, yeah.
Is everybody, you guys good with that? This direction to staff? Okay. We do appreciate the work and the report, so thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, moving on. Item 3, consider approval of replacement air conditioning unit for municipal building, and I see it's 74 degrees in here.
That's got to be a thermostat issue, because that's not the one that's bad. Correct. I believe it's the officer's room. You'd probably,
They don't need one in there.
They got new cars, Inga.
is that why you're here tonight?
Any questions for Jason on this?
Yes, of course. Jason, I guess the bid is from O'Leary?
Correct.
Have they checked or looked at the lines that feed from the compressor into the building?
Yep, they were here and assessed it, and they're just going to flush those out and reuse them. And then it's a new A coil in the furnace, and then the new condenser outside.
Okay. And now the coil in the furnace themselves, did they talk to you at all about the high humidity in the building sometimes in the summer when it gets in here?
We did not talk about that at all.
Okay. I can talk to you later about that. I have a solution for that.
Okay.
Any other questions for Jason?
Well, then I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the replacement of the air conditioning unit using designated fund balance money for $6,700 to O'Leary.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, on to ordinances and resolutions. Resolution 2023, not 2013, 2023-14, amended and restated resolution authorizing the issuance and establishing parameters for the sale of not to exceed $1,575,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2023A. So I did speak with Eileen about this before she left, and we do have John on from Ellers. Really what this is we're actually going to borrow less, and that then changes the timeline and shortens it by 1 year for the water utility, and so, which would save the ratepayers about $30,000, but that requires us to amend what we previously approved.
Did this amendment also take into consideration our new rating?
I think that will be taken into account on the bids themselves.
Got it.
John, did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did, sir.
Excellent. Okay, so Eileen asked John to attend virtually because she suspected that once we said that we would probably have no questions, but if you have questions, John is here. Otherwise, the chair would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2023-14 on the parameters of the resolution of bonds.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, John.
Have a good evening.
Have a good night. On to reports. May financial report. Eileen is not here. Any questions? Okay. Item 2, Airport Advisory Committee minutes from last month, May 8th. Any questions for Jim? And I would say questions for Doug. That was before Doug. He gets 1 month reprieve there. Any questions for Jim? All right, item 3, Park and Rec Board minutes from May 8th. Item 4, Library Board minutes from May 9th. Any questions for Mary?
I don't have a question for Mary, I have a question for Jason. How big does a rock have to be to get through a block window?
Was that a rock? Do you know, Doug? It was, okay. Bigger than I know.
I thought those things were indestructible.
Since we're talking about the library for the board's awareness, Tri-Troy leaders are meeting with the library board tomorrow evening with Mark Liberta to discuss the Tri-Troy library situation. So, and my wife is very happy with the summer programming at the library this year, so pass that along. Item 5, airport update. Verbal from the airport. Okay, now you don't get a reprieve. You have to give us a verbal update. No packet materials.
There we go. Doug Auger, Airport Manager. First off, I'd like to thank you all for giving me the confidence to take over the airport, so I appreciate that, and hopefully I live up to your expectations here. So I have a list of items that we're in the process of repairing, other jobs that need to be repaired. Obviously, the first and foremost was the fuel farm. Bill's been very helpful. We're getting it up and running. We're actually very glad that it's up and running. More work that needs to be done, hoses, paperwork, and everything else. So it's an ongoing problem, but we're going in the right direction anyhow. Lighting at the fuel farm was an issue. We found that lighting was out. It's up and running. There is another light that's out yet up there, which I have to repair. The FBO lighting in there was completely gone. There was only one light working. Got that working. Cleaning out the offices that are up there. Probably took a dumpster full of stuff out of there that was laying around there. So we're in the process of that. Office is being set up in the back. We're going in the right direction in there. The AWAS system, it's the Automated Weather Observation System, okay. I even wrote it down, so because I had no idea what it meant anyhow, so. But anyhow, there was a company we've been working with, and there were some issues with mice chewing through some wires. They got that fixed. I talked to him on Sunday. He was out there Sunday, went out there, and he got that up and running. There were some other issues with, excuse me, I don't know the terminology of it, but it views the sky as there, yeah. And there were some wasp nests in there, which I had no idea. Yes, and yeah, yes, they were gone. So a little bit lower, but I'm learning on stuff like that. But there's just a list of ongoing problems that are just a lot of small ones. I'm prioritizing them. Taxiway lights, runway lights. I repaired 6 of those. Runway lights, I got 6 that are in the process of being ordered. That were taken out. Weed spraying, the gates on the north and south side. Maintenance has been completely lack on that. And again, not throwing anybody to the bus, but it just needs to be addressed at some point. It's a priority. Tree trimming, fence lines, weed spraying out there. We started it. We had a guy go out there, and then I'm going to be finishing that up this week. Wind socks, that's an issue that we have to talk about at our next meeting, and mowing ongoing. Bill also mentioned something about, for advertisement, a pancake breakfast. The Friends did reach out to me. We are trying to get, in September, the pancake breakfast back and so forth, so. And then also, we were talking about some vending machines out there, so just for water, soda, and so forth. So trying to get some things started, I guess, get the small things taken care of first, and then we can start expanding on that, too. So, other than that, any questions?
I just want to thank you. You've jumped in head first.
Oh, yeah.
Above your eyeballs there, and just keep plugging at it.
Yep.
And appreciate it, and I really see that we're moving in the right direction.
Everybody, between the staff, Lori, everybody in the offices, Jason, everybody's been very helpful. A lot of questions. I have some knowledge, but being involved with it over the last 26 years, but I think the paperwork part is going to be the biggest challenge, but I think between Bill and everybody helping out, it'll be very, very educational, I guess, if nothing else.
I know you know this, I think one of the things that we're changing a bit, and it will be a bit of a people change management, is the hangar owners and the pilots out there are very proud of the airport, and they've done a lot of what I'd call volunteering and pitching in, and
Right.
But we're kind of trying to take that up to that next level, and that's that punch list of things that you're working through. So there's a little bit of like, hey, what's going on? Why can't I do this? And things like that. And I know you know that, but just I want anybody who's listening, like we're wanting to work with people, but we also need to make sure that we have awareness of what's going on. So
Right, it's just a matter of prioritizing what is the worst right now, and then getting to that point of getting everything taken care of. Then,
Which fire do you put out first?
Yep, and I got a few of them started, so.
Any other questions or comments for Doug?
Once again, I thank you as well, and please feel free to reach out if I can help in any way, Doug.
I appreciate that, thank you. So, okay, thank you.
All right, that's it for the regular session. I will then make a motion to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1985-1E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Airport manager and fixed base operator lease.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
President Johnson.
Yes.
Trustee Alexander. Trustee Holm.
Yes.
Trustee Nugent.
Yes.
Trustee Renucci.
Yes.
Trustee Smalley. Yes. Trustee Wisniewski. Yes. Thank you.